Hello and welcome to Frontline Videos. We are going to be discussing Nepal today. Protests to bring back the monarchy, which was formally abolished in 2008, has shaken up the politics of Nepal, India's northern neighbor. 2 persons were killed and many injured in protests when the government clamped down on those protests last Friday. Nepal has been a republic since 2008 after a massive movement for democracy overwhelmed King Gyanendra and he relinquished power. 2 decades later, almost 2 decades later, the demand that the former king should return has come back on the back of accusations of corruption and other allegations of misgovernance and seemingly unending political chaos in Kathmandu. Today, I will be discussing what's going on in Nepal with Ranjit Rae, India's former ambassador to Kathmandu. He served there from 2013 to 2017. He's also the author of a book called The Kathmandu Dilemma, Resetting India-Nepal Ties. And for all those who want to understand what goes on in Nepal, I recommend that you read that book. Welcome to Frontline, Ambassador Rae. These protests in Nepal are not entirely unexpected, are they? A movement has been building up for some time now over the years. And in the last elections, which were in 2022, we saw that the pro-monarchy party, Rashtriya Prajatantra Party, did quite well. That perhaps was the first, an early warning that that perhaps was an early warning to the political class of Nepal. Do you agree?
Well, let me say 2 things. The Rashtriya Prajatantra Party got 5.5% of the vote and 14 seats in a house which has 275 seats. So they certainly did better than the previous election when they had just got 1 seat. But to say that there is huge public support for the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party, which actually supports the restoration of the monarchy, I think is a bit far-fetched. What's happening in Nepal today is there is a lot of discontent with governance, with corruption, with the fact that it's the same political leaders for the last 30 years. It's a constant game of musical chairs. And I think the monarchists are trying to capitalize on this disenchantment and, develop their support.
So, you said that they did not do very well, but they did well enough, it seems, for the head of the party to be appointed as one of the deputy prime ministers in Pushpa Kamal Dahal's cabinet when he formed the government at that time.
You see, the politics of Nepal is very fragmented. There are 3 large parties. Then there are new parties that have come up like the Rashtriya Swatantra Party. Then there's Mr. Lingden's party, which is number 5. There are independent groups, Madhesi groups. And with the system that they have, the electoral system is a combination of first past the post and proportional representation. It becomes very difficult for any party to have an absolute majority. And that's why you see these coalitions constantly in Nepal. And these coalitions are not based on any ideological compatibility. These are really sort of opportunistic coalitions with, people joining coalitions because they want to get some ministership or the others. There's a lot of bargaining going on. So I don't think the fact that somebody becomes a deputy prime minister really represents the popular support base that the person has. It just represents the clout he might have within the government. Without his support, the government may not survive.
Right. So you spoke about corruption and sort of the lack of governance, perhaps. But this has been the feature of Nepal politics since 2008. I mean, they took a long time even to frame the constitution. The constitution was finalized and passed only in 2015. And from 2015 to now, there's been an unending change of governments, coalitions, are formed, they fall, then new coalitions come in. So what really changed in the last 2 months, say from February or early March this year, that this movement for monarchy suddenly became so big and and gained so much traction?
So the discontent has been brewing for some time. It's not that it's happened in the last 2 months. If you see the last elections, new political forces. There is this Rashtriya Swatantra Party led by media personality Rabi Amit Shane, did extremely well. It was a party established a few months before the general elections, and they emerged as the fourth largest party. Then in the municipal elections, you had independent candidates not affiliated to any political party doing phenomenally well. And I dare say that today, for instance, the most popular politician in Nepal is probably the mayor of Kathmandu, who used to be an avatar in his previous incarnation. So clearly, this discontent against the established order is being reflected in various ways. And the second point is, a third of Nepal's population is abroad. They live and work abroad. The outmigration is tremendous. And these people are obviously, they see how other countries are prospering, are developing, are functioning. And so they are also playing a pretty important role in terms of the political processes back home. And they are advising their families and parents to vote for newer forces with younger leaders, give new leadership a chance. But this is the space that everyone, including the monarchists, is trying to exploit. But I don't know, I'm a bit skeptical because, don't forget that it is the same King Gyanendra who in 2005 abolished multi-party democracy, became an autocratic monarch, thought he could deal with the Maoist insurgency and the political parties by himself. And so, there is a lot of backstory to this particular monarch. So I'm a bit skeptical in terms of the magnitude of support that he has, but certainly there is a lot of discontent, and it appears that support for the monarchy may be growing in Nepal.
And the former king himself is not doing anything to allay the fears of the political class, the democratically elected political class, that he does not, that he is discouraging these protests. I mean, there's no evidence of that. In fact, there is evidence that he is actually stoking these protests that are asking for a return to the monarchy and for his return.
Oh, absolutely. Because, he has appointed a committee to organize these protests. And, that was headed by a gentleman who's 87 years old and now under house arrest, I think. He appointed a very controversial politician as the commander of the protests, and the protests went horribly wrong. When there was violence, burning of buildings, 2 people lost their lives. So it became very messy, and there has been no regret, no word of apology from the protesters. In fact, the pro-monarchy people are basically saying that it was the government that infiltrated into their protests and created this mayhem. And the king has been silent over the last few days. Not a word has come from the ex-king.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He also has not said anything to rein in these people who are apparently his supporters. And he has also not apologized for the violence or anything. Do you get a sense that he might be arrested as well?
Well, there are all kinds of campaigns on social media. And as we speak, the Prime Minister and various democratic political parties are meeting, Republican political parties are meeting to decide next steps. The monarchist party has, of course, warned the government that any such decision would have huge consequences. So, we can't say as of now what is going to happen. But my sense is that, for the monarchy, and those that want the revival of monarchy, if there is unrest and chaos in Nepal, and if the government is seen to be ineffective, I think they perhaps assess that this will benefit their position, and this will benefit them in some way because it will show how utterly incompetent the Republican forces are.
So there isn't yet a properly framed political response to these protests from the political parties yet. I mean, from the non-monarchical political parties yet.
So there has been condemnation, and the Maoist party also took out a big rally in Kathmandu on the same day, I think. And the Prime Minister has criticized it. The Nepali Congress, which is the largest party, has criticized it. So there has been condemnation. And if you look at the media, virtually every editorial has very, very strongly, criticized these efforts and these protests. But now I think all the parties have got together and they're trying to see, what course of action to follow. Two of the major leaders of the protests are under arrest. They belong to the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party and they are under arrest.
So you spoke about this person who was a rapper and who's now the mayor of Kathmandu. He won in the recent elections. And where does and he seems to be a very popular politician at this point. Where does he stand in all these protests? What is
he hasn't said anything except that he's made a smart move, and he sent a bill for over 7 lakh rupees to the residents of the ex-king, saying that you've created this mayhem in Kathmandu and there's this damage, and this amount is what you have to pay. So that has been done, but he has not made any political statement. Neither he nor the fourth largest party led by the charismatic journalist, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party. These two parties have not made any official statements as yet, though individual leaders may have said something. So
you spoke just now about how people seem to have forgotten that Gyanendra was a dictatorial king. He usurped the powers of the government. He refused to hold elections, and so people, in a sense, that memory seems to have receded for a lot of people who now think that with the king will come back a great country, or well-governed country at least. Do you think this has something also to do with the fact that now most of Nepal is now, I mean, the voters are all young, there's a new demography. So this may be an indication of the changing demography of Nepal, which also, explains why this rapper is doing so well.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. And in fact, when the king returned to Kathmandu from Pokhara a couple of days ago, I think on March 9th, there was a big crowd that turned out to greet him. And it was not just his traditional supporters. There were a lot of young people. And, these young people are, say, in the age group of 20 to 30. And, the ex-king took over executive power in 2005. So it's, 20 years down the line. So these young people really don't have any memory of the monarchy. And so there is this nostalgia. And the second element, of course, is that, there is this nostalgia for a Hindu country. In fact, in 2015, when the constitution was taken to all the districts and the villages and the people, the one issue on which a lot of people, and especially from the Tarai, advocated and suggested was that Nepal should be a Hindu republic. Now, the problem with that in Nepal has been that the monarchy and Hindu has been very closely interlinked. And since the king is believed or is treated like an avatar of Vishnu, so clearly Hindu Rashtra and the monarchy are linked. So it's difficult to separate the two. But there is this, some of the supporters of Hindu Rashtra need not necessarily be supporters of the king. So there is this dynamic also at play in Nepal.
So it's interesting you say that, because we heard the Prime Minister, Mr. Kharga Prasad Oli, say that India is actually stoking these protests in favor of the monarchy. What do you make of that allegation?
So you see, what happened was, in this rally that was taken out, there was one big poster of the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, along with that of King Gyanendra. And Yogi Adityanath, presides over the Gorakhnath Mutt. And Gorakhnath is the presiding deity of the Shah kings of Nepal. So there's a very close connection
of the dynasty.
Of the dynasty with the Gorakhnath Mutt. And in the past, before becoming chief minister, Mr. Yogi Adityanath was quite a strong advocate of monarchy and Hindu Rashtra in Nepal. And in fact, some of these old videos are now playing quite a lot on social media in Nepal. But to be fair, post assuming the position of chief minister, he has not publicly said anything on this issue. So my sense is that the monarchists are basically using this to suggest to their own people that India is supporting the revival of the monarchy and the Hindu Rashtra in Nepal. And this is something, for instance, when the foreign minister of Nepal was here for the Raisina dialogues, she asked Foreign Minister Jaishankar directly whether India was supporting the pro-monarchy protests, and he denied it completely. So, this kind of dynamic is going on in Nepal, and it's very interesting because these are the people who used to say, the monarchists used to say that, India is interfering in Nepal. And the same people are now using, the poster of one of our leaders in order to suggest that India is supporting them. So this is more, for domestic consumption. And, I don't know, at least the government has denied. Foreign Minister Jaishankar has categorically said this is not the case.
But there has been concern in Nepal. I mean, we've been reading that there has been concern in Nepal about the influence of the RSS and other Hindutva organizations in the border regions, basically in the Terai regions. Are those worries misplaced, do you think?
Well, the Hindutva organizations have been working in Nepal for several decades. It's nothing new.
The changes, perhaps, that there is now a BJP government in power at the center. So that alters the dynamics.
Yeah, so I think one needs to make some distinction between the government and the party and affiliated organizations, like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and others. And there may be elements, there may be some individuals or some organizations in India that want, they would like to see a Hindu Rashtra in Nepal, or would like the monarchy to come back in Nepal. There may be some people like that. But that is not the official view of the government of India. I think the official view of the government of India has been that, these are issues that really the people and the government of Nepal have to decide. And don't forget that this new constitution emerged after 10 years of the Maoist insurgency, 17,000 people killed, 2 years of the Madhesi agitations. And it is the outcome of the negotiations following the insurgency and the agitations that have been factored into the new constitution. So, the federalism aspect, the republican aspect, the secular aspect. So these are all, very, very sensitive compromises that have been reached between the political class, amongst the political parties in Nepal. So for India, since these are very sensitive domestic issues in Nepal, and obviously if these issues are reopened, you can expect some tension and maybe even conflict in Nepal because of the past history that we've all seen. So for India, we should be very careful about taking sides on any of these issues. If you look at the history of Nepal, it is the monarchists and the communists that have, raised this or created this anti-India nationalism in Nepal. And this very ex-king in 2005, after he took over all executive authority, abolished multi-party democracy, goes to the SAARC summit in Dhaka and lobbies vigorously for giving membership to China. So, I have a feeling that we don't have such an informed public discussion or, media discussion in India on some of these issues. And people are basically, sort of, nostalgic, or there is some sentiment, ek hi to Hindu Rashtra tha. There was only one Hindu kingdom, even that has gone, notions like that. But I think there needs to be much more informed debate, and especially amongst the media, because the Indian media is very popular in Nepal and everybody watches it very carefully and closely.
In the past, we've seen that whenever there's a crisis, Nepali politicians would actually come to Delhi. They'd have consultations with the government in Delhi, and there would be a lot of toing and froing. Is there anything like that going on now?
Well, I'm sure the government of India is engaged with the political leadership of across the board, and this is something we have to do at all times, not only during crises. We have to be engaged with all political parties, with all institutions in Nepal. Absolutely. So I'm sure that is going on.
So, but that also, in a way, paradoxically, that also comes back at us as India interfering in the internal politics of Nepal.
So you see, this is the whole point, because, here you have people who say India interferes using pictures of Indian leaders in their processions to garner support. Yeah. Then, if India gets involved, then they say, oh, this is what India is doing. So this is, I think, in any neighborly relationship, especially when the relationship is so asymmetric, and, India looms large in the domestic politics of that country, things like this are bound to happen. And, we have to take it in our stride and deal with it as best as we can.
Prime Minister Oli has been, is seen to be close to Beijing. And in fact, he recently visited Beijing. So how's China looking at these protests? Because it is also very invested in Nepal, in a sense. It's building many infrastructure projects, and it's building railways and dams. So what is the view from Beijing? Would you be able to tell us?
China has certainly stepped up its engagement in Nepal in a big way, and not only in terms of infrastructure development and economic partnership, but in terms of political involvement. And, they have established very close links with the communist parties, and at one time were trying very hard. It was successful just for a bit of bringing all the left parties together. That arrangement didn't survive very long because of interpersonal differences between the leaders. But I think that seems to be the long-term strategy of the Chinese. Historically, they were very happy with the monarch because, it was one point of contact, and for them, the Tibetan issue, etc., was very important. After the monarchy ended and multi-party democracy came in, it's obviously a very messy system because there are so many leaders. And so the Chinese had to change tack and reach out to different political parties and different leaders. So I don't think that the Chinese would be happy with instability in Nepal because, for them, their sense is that Western countries and others will then start, to get deeper footholds, and that might have implications for their interests in Nepal. But I have not seen any Chinese statement on the current, the very specific developments that have happened in the last couple of weeks. But historically, they were very close to the monarchy. Post multi-party democracy, they've changed tack and reached out to all political parties. And apart from economic engagement, they are deeply involved in the politics, and especially the left communist politics of Nepal. And Prime Minister Oli made his first visit to China after taking over. Of course, his people say that, look, he waited to get an invitation from India for a long time, and the invitation never came. So then he went to China. Incidentally, the invitation still hasn't gone from India. But
why is that? Why does India hesitate to invite him?
I think given the history of what Mr. Oli has done, the fact of the, boundary issue that flared up when he was prime minister at an earlier time, I think so. So the relationship has had a lot of ups and downs.
But that too has a history, isn't it? I mean, there was this really crippling blockade of Nepal from the Indian side in 2015, 2016, after their constitution was passed. And that is held to be one of the reasons that Nepal then turned to China for assistance at that time. And that is also the period when I think you were ambassador there. So maybe you can explain to us what that was.
Yeah,
how that has affected relations.
As they say, it takes two to tango. So at that time, in 2015, and especially after this horrible earthquake of April and May 2015, I think the political leaders decided to rush through with the constitution. And since they had the numbers in parliament, they decided to ride roughshod over several of the solemn agreements that had been made with the Maoists and the Madhesi parties, particularly with the Madhesi parties, because the Madhesi parties had a reduced representation in the Second Constituent Assembly. So there were already a lot of protests going on saying that, the federal boundaries are not properly demarcated. There is not enough representation for the, people who feel discriminated against. There's not enough inclusion in the state sector and things like that. And the constitution was rushed through. And at that time, the government announced that this is the best constitution in the world and certainly better than the Indian constitution. Now, just 10 years down the road, they find there are issues with the kind of federal system that they have in place. There are, several other issues with the proportional representation system that they have in place. So I think, you have to look at it in context. The constitution of 2015 was supposed to emerge out of the agreements made with the Maoists and the Madhesis. When these agreements were rolled back to some extent, protests started in the Tarai. Mm-hmm. And what was India saying? India was saying, please accommodate the concerns of all your, all groups and sections in your society. And what was why was India justified in saying so? Because India, in a sense, was a guarantor to the agreements that had taken place, whether it was the peace process which started in Delhi in November 2005 or the Madhesi agreements of 2007-2008. So India, in a sense, was involved in these agreements. And so many leaders, for instance, told us, I was in Nepal at the time, that look, we, agreed to these things because, you said that this will be implemented and this is not being done. So without any getting into details, the Indian message was, please accommodate the concerns of everyone. That is the way to stability. If people feel left out, then clearly there will be tension and even conflict. And at that time, don't forget, there was also a secessionist movement in the Tarai. And we were very concerned, if you have a disturbed Tarai, it will have implications here. So that is when the Madhesis started picketing the border. Of course, the Nepalese call it the Indian blockade. We say it was the picketing of some of the border checkposts by the Madhesis, which led to interruptions of supply. And of course, Prime Minister Oli told me himself that, look, if stuff is not coming to India, what are we to do? So I had no option but to go to China. But I have a feeling that, I think China's role is increasing anyway in Nepal and in other countries. And we will see more and more of this. And in Nepal, it's also now increasing in domestic politics. So I think we have to figure out and handle how best we can manage this. And
China's China's role is increasing in Nepal because of what, Tibet, or what is the reason that China is so invested in Nepal?
Well, I wouldn't say so invested in Nepal, but China is certainly invested in Nepal. And don't forget that Nepal is a neighboring country for China. I mean, they have it used to be a neighboring country for Tibet. Tibet is now been taken over by China, and so it's a neighboring country of China. And obviously, Tibet and Tibetan refugees is a big issue for the Chinese, and also the activities of some of the Western countries in terms of supporting Tibetan refugees. Secondly, I think the India-China relationship also influences some of China's activities in our neighborhood. And obviously, when there's a tension in the relationship, so they do step up. And the third thing, of course, is on the Nepalese side. They see huge opportunities in China with China's development. So the Chinese are giving a lot of scholarships. A lot of delegations are invited from Nepal. Youth delegations, even panchayat level delegations are going to China. So China is certainly very heavily engaged. For various reasons, and also the fact that they are engaged, in most countries in the world, even those that are far away from their borders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, just going back to the monarchy and the pro-monarchy protests, how do you see this unfolding from here? What may happen now?
Well, a lot will depend in terms of if any action is taken by the government vis-a-vis the ex-king. Secondly, I think all the Republican political parties are going to come together, and they represent 95% of the popular vote in the country. So I really don't see very realistic prospects of this sort of issue assuming larger and larger proportions. But certainly, I may be wrong, but a lot will depend on whether the governments can deliver programs, whether they can take care of the aspirations of the young people, and whether they will allow for younger leaders to emerge. In Nepal, the average age is about 25. And the leaders are in their 70s, and some are touching 80. And I've dealt with Nepal for 30 years, and it's the same leaders that we deal with to this day. There is no change. So, there is a lot of frustration, and every leader has been prime minister several times. So they've seen the past history, and they don't expect anything different. So, there is this great desire that you need young, dynamic people who will really focus on economic development, create jobs. One great thing happening between India and Nepal, of course, is hydropower. Now, that is progressing well. And electricity trade bilaterally and now sub-regionally with Bangladesh is a huge development. And this will really contribute to Nepal's economic development. We are committed to buy 10,000 megawatts over a 10-year period. There are some massive mega projects that need to be quickly implemented. Remaining issues need to be sorted out, like Pancheshwar. But I think hydropower is a very, very major development in the bilateral relationship right now.
There's also a China angle to that, I think, because some of those dams are constructed by the Chinese, and India has told Nepal that it will not take electricity from the dams that are constructed by the Chinese. Is that right?
So we have certain guidelines, and our import of electricity from Nepal is on the basis of those guidelines. And it's not, there's no ban, but there are different methods of examining proposals depending on the equity ownership or the EPC participation in those projects. So, it's a question of you look at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty. I look at it as a glass half full, and our bilateral trade in electricity is now several 100 megawatts. We're also supplying electricity during the night hours, and there are big plans on the way. Transmission lines are being constructed, so there's a lot happening, and I think this will also have a very positive effect in terms of Nepal's trade deficit with India. This is one of the irritants in the relationship which is raised from time to time. So I think this is a work in progress, and I'm sure some of the issues that exist will get sorted out in the future. But I think a lot of positives have happened, and we should work in that direction.
So I'm trying very hard not to make this thing about India and China. We are discussing Nepal. So I'll ask you one last question about the monarchy. If the former king, would he be ready to contest elections? The prime minister has challenged him to stand for elections if he really wants to return. Would he take up that challenge?
Well, so far he has not. I mean, he's a citizen of Nepal, and if he thinks he has so much popularity, best thing to do is contest elections. He already has a party that supports the monarchy, so contest elections and test your popularity out in the public. But he obviously has not been prepared to do that thus far, and he really wants to, emerge as a king. Rather than contest and join the democratic mainstream. So I don't think that is really going to happen, and that is also an indication. Perhaps he knows that what is the extent of support that he has in the Nepalese population.
With that, I'll bring this interview to a close. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ranjit Rae, for your time and for your insights on the latest in Nepal, which has shaken up the country so much. Thank you so much.